Okay. Thanks for coming back, everyone. So this week we're talking about sentences. For those of you who work as editors, some of this would have been pretty basic for you, but for a lot of people who haven't thought about sentence structure since they were in maybe high school, this sort of stuff isn't automatic. And probably if you work in the corporate realm, you see stuff from people who just don't give a lot of thought to sentence structure and how to make it clear. They sort of do a brain dump, and whatever comes out in whatever order, and they don't go back and fix it to make it clear. So that is the job of plain language, is to decide what should be included in one sentence, what order things should go in, and so on. Did anybody have questions about the presentation? Yeah.
Michelle, yeah, I have a question. First of all, the exercises, it wasn't always that easy.
Yeah, they are really open to interpretation.
Really pare them down. But also, I don't know if the others found this as well, but is it fair to say that there's a fine line between style and plain language? Because to have very simple, shortish sentences might be how we speak or whatever, but it's not normally how we necessarily write. Like we like to change it up a bit. Have a bit of flair, to make it more interesting for the reader too, right? So
again, it all comes back to your audience, right? How literate are they? How, do they all speak English as a first language? What's their attention span for this material? Are they skimming or are they reading? Are they engrossed in it, or are they just trying to get through it? So all of that comes into play. I think, most business writing shouldn't have 100-word sentences because nobody's going to make it through. Whereas some literature, that's perfectly fine. So it's all about what's appropriate to the audience. And sometimes you don't want all of your sentences to be the same length. And we talk about that a bit in next week's part on paragraphs. You do want to mix it up a little bit because people get bored if it's all super short sentences. Right. But at the same time, you don't want them to get lost as to what the point of the sentence was.
Got it.
Was there anything else that raised any questions in the presentation? No, all seemed sort of straightforward. It is really, for editors, this is sort of the bread and butter stuff that you do anyway. You go, oh, why is there a whole clause in between the subject and the verb? Let's move that. Or, when you're translating, certainly in some languages, things go in different orders.
Right.
And you have to switch them to English order.
Or a lot of subclauses.
Yes.
German is notorious for that.
Is it? And French is pretty bad too.
And then the verb is always at the end. The main
verb. That would drive me. I tried to learn German very, very briefly once, and then I saw how many tenses there were and quit. Immediately.
Not to mention definite, indefinite.
No, it was doing my head in. Heather, you had a...
I was just going to say, you're right. If you're an editor, this is your bread and butter. But two things come to mind. One is that you get caught up on things, bad habits, and that is the thing. It's not that that's your thing, but that's how it's done. You kind of get into a mindset. And so
if you see something often enough, it starts to seem right.
A little bit of a slippery slope there. And also, as Linda just said, style
Mm.
Style sometimes dictates. I sometimes forget what's style and what's just good, simple, understandable writing. So it's good to be reminded about that distinction. And also, the last thing I'll say about this is that it's really helpful to have the to go through the video and have those all of the things addressed if you happen to be needing to explain to other people. So it's really helpful to, it's like, oh yeah, so it's not just, I'm being a jerk.
Right. Yes. You have the
Maybe
evidence.
I am, but
Yeah, no, it
So-
comes up a lot. And I think if you're the sort of person for whom this is instinctive, because you've always had good grammar and you've done a lot of reading and you know what sounds right, it can be very difficult to explain to somebody why what they've written doesn't sound right.
and also why you should have to, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so it's a good reminder just to, take a step back and not be, not be too full of yourself.
Yes.
But
Yep.
I think a lot of people don't necessarily write well. And for example, again, I'm coming out of the translation world. Like sometimes as a translator, you're looking at it quite differently from somebody who would have written something. And so you can see where the issues are. And you realize that you're almost forced to rewrite sometimes. Because and that's where I could use an excuse. If somebody came to question it, I could come back and say, well, in English, it would
Right.
be this,
Yes.
you know.
This is how we say, this is how we do it in English.
That's right. But when you're talking to an English speaker or whatever,
Yes.
it's a little bit harder, as Heather was saying, to justify why you want to make these changes. And
Yes.
sometimes it's almost instinctive. It's hard to explain because you feel, it's not
But
right.
it's completely legitimate to say this is the way people are used to hearing it. And their brain doesn't have to work as hard to understand what you're saying when you say it the way they're used to it. Whereas if you've done it another way just to mix things up or because that's your style, you're making them work to understand you. And when people have to work harder to understand you, they give up.
Right.
Yeah.
They stop reading.
Yeah.
So that's well researched, that people don't want to do brain work while they're reading. They want to be able to understand it, easily. They want it to be obvious what you mean.
But as you said, Michelle, it really depends on your audience. So we're all educated. So if it's too much subject, verb, object, at some point we're going to come out too, because we're not stimulated enough to
But
hang
then
in there.
It's the difference between writing to get information across and writing to for the joy of making something sound nice, right? It's a careful balance, because a lot of what plain language addresses is when you really need to get that information across clearly and make sure everybody gets it. And so sounding good, sounding literary, kind of takes a back seat. But I imagine with translation, there's a lot of what you would pick up on a lot is ambiguous sentences, where there are a couple of possible interpretations, and then you have to figure out which one the writer meant.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you can query the writer, but I find usually you're kind of on your own. You just got to keep going, right?
You have to figure it out from the context.
That's right. But again, that's where you can see too, some people just generally write better than other people as well. And again, you're analyzing it from a different perspective. And perhaps even my own writing in English might have errors or oddities. But when I'm looking at somebody else's writing, well, it would be like editing, right? If I revise or edit somebody's work, again, I'm looking at it with a different eye than if I had done it myself.
Because of course, what we write makes perfect sense to us.
Absolutely.
It came out of our brains, makes perfect sense, and we can't understand why everybody doesn't understand it.
It's so clear.
It's so clear until somebody else goes, but wait, what did you mean by this?
Right, right.
Yeah.
That's why it's good not to show it to anybody else and just go with it.
It depends what your end goal is, I guess.
Yeah. It's a little bit easier on the ego.
Debbie, so this homework is, there's obviously no one right answer to anything. It's your judgment on how to clarify these examples. So the first one is a ridiculously long-winded way of explaining what's going on with weather-related cancellations. Any of you want to read out your solution? Sure. Okay. Linda?
I'll start, Michelle. The university's weather policy allows classes to be canceled when the weather threatens the safety of students and staff. So classes will be canceled today and possibly tomorrow. Classes will probably resume on Friday. Makeup classes will be scheduled for the end of the semester. I didn't think the dates mattered because it's addressing people in real time.
Yeah, well, possibly, yeah. I guess it depends we haven't specified how this is communicated, right? Whether it's tacked up on a door somewhere or sent out in an email or
True.
so that it would probably depend a bit on that. If it's posted on the website, you'd want to put the dates just because things tend to stay on a website when they're no longer relevant.
Right.
So today could be today and it could be last week.
I would also add that people get paid.
Yeah.
Just in
Yeah,
case.
this is, I mean, I assume this is a message to the instructors.
Yeah, not salaried, but the
Yeah.
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 part-timers.
Did anybody take a different approach? Oh,
No,
Linda, did you want to?
it's just the question then. So where would you put the paid, but maybe the others have an example that they did that.
Sure. Heather, you want to read out yours?
Yeah.
If you're not chewing?
Sorry.
It's okay.
It's we're an hour later.
Everybody's multitasking tonight.
Apparently. I said something similar to Linda, but I put classes will be canceled today, January 13th, possibly tomorrow, January 14th. And resumption Friday. I mean, I found the whole thing very odd because it's found to be, the weather is found to be injurious. It's like, well, weather is unpredictable, who knows? But anyway, and then I basically carried on. Oh, sorry. I don't know if I did. I said that during instructors will be paid, as stated in their contracts after that.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you're back, please schedule makeup classes for the end of the semester. I didn't know if the instructor was supposed to do that or if Christy did that. So anyway.
How many sentences did you end up with?
Oh, I knew you were going to ask that.
Mm-hmm.
I have 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay. And Claudia, did you do something similar?
Fairly similar. I never know when I'm oversimplifying, but I just put the university's policy is to cancel classes when the weather is dangerous. Classes will be canceled today, January 13th, and possibly tomorrow, January 14th. Classes may restart on Friday, January 15th. All instructors will still be paid as stated in their contracts. Makeup classes, and I didn't know whether to say should be scheduled for the end of the semester. I wasn't quite sure who the audience was, if you're talking to the instructor, but if you're talking about paid, then that's what you're talking about, who you're talking to.
Yeah.
I thought, I did think that was a weird sentence, but anyway,
It is.
right. It's the instructors, not the students.
Yeah. How
How many sentences, Claudia?
I've got five. One,
Five.
2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, like I think people would understand when the weather's dangerous. If you live in Canada, you know what that means, you know?
Mhm. Yeah, I had it as unsafe weather conditions.
Yeah, or is unsafe. Unsafe would be another, yeah.
Dangerous, unsafe, same.
So if we're agreeing that it's addressing instructors, do we have to say instructors will be paid? As
Or
oh,
you will be paid.
you will be paid
It could be you will be paid.
You will be
Yeah. Address the reader directly.
in your contract.
Yep, that's good. Yeah, the one thing I think this is missing, the information that's missing that should be added, because it says that classes are canceled today and maybe tomorrow, there should be some information on when and how that decision will be communicated to them,
Right.
right? When will we know whether they're canceled tomorrow? How are you going to tell us? So that information is actually missing from the sentence in the original version. Probably should be added.
Or something like check this web page again tomorrow.
Yeah, or
Date.
we will send an email before 7 p.m. or whatever. Because otherwise they're going to be sitting around wondering whether they need to get up in the morning. All right, so yeah, everybody made sense of that pretty much. Should we move on to the employee dress code? So this one was a little bit shorter, but
Are there actual companies that do demerit points and stuff in this era? I guess so.
there are certainly companies that send you home if you're not properly
Okay.
attired according to them.
Okay.
If you work in the retail clothing industry.
Oh, I was just gonna say, are they hiring? But maybe not. And maybe that's not an environment for me anyway.
There's certainly lots of people hiring in retail right now.
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
They
I
can't
see
keep
that.
anyone.
Yeah.
All of their potential employees want to be TikTok influencers instead. Yes, Linda.
Shall I start?
Oh, sure. Yeah, go
Okay.
ahead.
All right. The employee handbook describes the mandatory dress code. Employees will receive 1 demerit point for each time they fail to follow the code. Those who have accumulated at least 3 demerit points will be disciplined, possibly suspended without pay, or asked to leave immediately.
Okay. So you've used third person. It might be more direct to use second person, so you must comply with the code. If you violate the code, you will receive a demerit point. If you get 3 demerit points, and so on and so on.
Okay.
Very few employee handbooks actually are written like that, but they should be.
Well, it would be in the passive or the third
Yeah.
person. Right?
Third person, yeah, employees who do this, will do this. They will be, demerit points will be added to their whatever.
It
Right.
sounds threatening almost.
Yes.
Something like that, I can see why it wouldn't be as direct because it sounds really heavy-handed.
Well, it is heavy-handed.
Exactly.
Yes.
Indeed.
Heather, did you have a different approach or?
No, but I did say you.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, basically, I just changed
Oh,
it.
Linda, how many sentences did you end up with? You're muted, my dear.
Sorry. I had 3, but the third one was longer than the first 2.
Right. Okay. Heather, did you want to, while you're unmuted? Got it.
I'm sorry, how many sentences?
Yeah,
Yeah, 3.
3. Okay.
Yeah. You know, and it's almost, shorter sounds more forceful. I think that's
Yes.
kept them longer. Because I
Right. It softens it a bit.
softens it a bit. Which
Yes.
isn't
Otherwise,
necessarily-
it does sound like a bit like a drill sergeant.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Claudia, did you?
I had 3 cents, pretty much close to what others have said. I used you. If you reach 3 demerit points, you could face discipline, lose pay, or be sent home.
Right. Okay. That all makes sense.
What Claudia, I guess what threw me was the possibilities, the possible, or probable or whatever, keep getting
Right.
around, right? One thing, it will result, so it was definitive, it will result in disciplinary action, not could result. But the could works for the possible, all these possibles.
Mhm.
So I found that was a bit difficult to.
Yeah,
either
and you can
you're
always,
definitive the whole way, or you're
yes, and if you
possible
have
or
some
the way.
things, some things that are possible and some things that are definitive, maybe they go in separate sentences.
Right.
You know, you will
will.
face disciplinary action. This may include suspension of pay or being sent home.
Right.
Because yeah, otherwise you get into a situation where you have a non-parallel list,
Exactly. Exactly.
and a lot of people get caught up in those. They sort of trip up. It can be easier to just split it out. The third example sentence is from an actual association bylaw. Because sometimes reality is crazier than anything you can make up. So this is a prime example of putting a huge clause after the subject and before the verb. The
Right.
association may what? What might they do? Well, we have to
It's
read
this-
another 2 lines before we know.
Hmm. I'll-
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm happy to start. Maybe we
Sure.
can just
Yeah.
go in order again. Am I muted? No. The association will no longer send copies of the annual financial statements and documents provided in subsection 17.1 of the Act. Instead, members will be informed when a copy is available on the association's website. Alternatively, members will be able to get a copy free of charge at the registered office or by mail.
That sounds perfectly good as a message you would send out to members. Probably wouldn't work as an actual bylaw. Like
Okay.
the will no longer is like an update, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if it was a message saying, hey, we've changed this bylaw, then that would be perfectly good.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, again, we've got a possible here. They may.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
it's up to the association whether they feel like sending copies to everyone.
right. Okay, so you think this is a bylaw, or you know that this
Yes,
is.
I know that this is a
Yeah.
bylaw because I
Yeah.
copied it from an actual set of bylaws.
Okay, because I didn't perceive it.
Yeah,
as
it didn't,
that.
I didn't label it, I guess, as such. So yeah, your interpretation is perfectly understandable. And for the way you interpret it, your solution is fine.
I'll go next.
Sure.
I just said the association may publish, I just took out the clause. And then, yeah, I mean, I didn't realize it came from a bylaw, but it sounded sort of like legalese. Like I didn't feel like I wanted to change too much. I
Mhm.
mean, I know it says instead of sending copies, it doesn't say that it actually did send copies. I just found it a little, it was too vague for me to actually just refer to the sending copies. So I just said it may publish. And then I stopped after the 1, 2, 3, 4th line. It says registered office of the association, period. Any member may request a free copy at the registered office or by mail.
Okay. Claudia, what did you do there?
I struggled with this one. I have too long a first sentence. And I wrote this more thinking this is information for members, not,
Okay.
but it was more like,
That's fine.
instead of sending, like I left out a lot of stuff, instead of sending copies of its annual financial statements and other documents to members, the association may let you know these are available on its website or at its head office. You may request a free copy of the documents from the office or ask to have them mailed to you. I went at it as how to get the documents if you want them, as opposed to a bylaw.
Yeah, and the only
Right.
comment I'd make on that is that you've referred to the association as it as opposed to
Okay.
us,
Okay.
because it's probably coming from the association.
Okay.
But otherwise, yeah,
Me.
I did a sample answer where this is part of a bylaw, so I'll just read mine out so that you get an idea. And it is still a little bit legalese, for lack of a better word, but much less so. So it just says subsection 17.1 of the Act, and then in parentheses, annual financial statements, refers to the association's annual financial statements and certain other documents, period. We may make the documents available on the association's website and at the head office instead of sending them to all members. We will send a notice to members letting them to know where they can access the documents. Members can request a free copy by mail or by visiting the head office.
That's a good point, because you're saying, I wondered what the subject was. You're basically saying that subsection 17.1 is the subject, right?
Yeah, basically. So this is probably subsection 17.2, right?
Right. Got it.
Or something, right? It's saying, okay, all of these documents that we talked about in the previous section are available to the members, and this is how.
Right. You just said it much better than it's ever been written.
Yeah, I mean, association bylaws, contracts, these are some of the worst offenders in terms of just putting clause after clause after clause that, you know, don't mean much. So yeah, clarity is good, and like I could probably rewrite that plainer than what I just read out, but it's already a few steps better than the original. And the funny thing is how many people resist when it sounds clear and simple. Oh, that can't be legal. That can't, if it's that clear, it can't be right.
Well, it was interesting that Deb was talking about where to put a comma,
Mm-hmm.
because the comma can change the meaning, right? I think there's
Absolutely.
cases where they argue about the position of a comma or whatever.
Exactly. And it can make the difference between, you know, whether things are inclusive or optional, or, you know, all kinds of things. And that's why things like short sentences where you separate things out and explain each part separately, or bullet lists where you see, you know, where one option starts and another option ends. Because sometimes people will, the last two things on a list, you know, if you're not using a serial comma, might seem like one big option
Mm,
instead of two separate options. And that can make a legal difference.
right. Right.
So, yeah.
So Michelle, you said you could have made your version even simpler. So
Yeah.
just briefly, how would you do that? What else would you take out or change? Because yours is already
It's fairly simple.
there.
Um,
Like how pared down can you go before
yeah.
you lose something critical?
I'm just seeing what's excessive in here. So I could have taken out where I put in parentheses annual financial statements, which is the name of the subsection. In theory, doesn't have to be there. Does it add clarity? Does it add clutter? It's hard to say.
Well, you said this is probably 17.2, so we
Yeah.
read it already in 17.1.
Because everybody reads their associations documents very thoroughly.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And in order. Yeah. Like, we may make the documents available is kind of wordy. We may put the documents on the association's website. Or we may post the documents on the association's website instead of we may make the documents available on.
Hmm.
That sort of thing. It still sounds a little bit legalese that way. Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to sit and mull it over to see how I compare. But like the further you get into it, the more you try to fix it, the more effort it takes, and the more trying things and
Right.
how they work.
So that's how you would do it, basically. I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No.
Because you did say, oh, I could even reduce this further. It was like,
Yeah, I think I could reduce it further, but I would have to work on it and make sure I didn't leave anything important out, like you say. You can oversimplify and you've lost some of the meaning, and that's not good with a bylaw.
right.
So Michelle, I mean, do you do a lot of rewriting of people's text to plain language? Because it must take a really long time. Do you start to get familiar with a certain organization's work or client, and you start to kind of know how to simplify?
Yeah, I mean, and it depends on the client, right? Because some of them want you to do the bare minimum. They want to keep as much of the original author's style as possible because they don't want to go through the argument, right? Of this is better because they want to kind of, we fixed this to make it house style and grammatically correct. Whereas others are like, yes, by all means, make this sound human. But I think if you work with the same organization or the same writers over a period of time, you pick up on their tics, the things that they do over and over again that are not clear. And so it becomes automatic to fix those. Some people are just all over the place with the throat clearing. It is important to remember that blah, 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 blah. It should be noted that blah, blah, blah. And, some people's writing is just full of that stuff, and you can just start delete. And those are the easy jobs, right? And then you start to notice, passive voice starts to jump out at you after a while.
It's like clear cutting. I noticed that once you get rid of some things, everything else, well, first of all, you also realize sometimes that something's saying practically nothing. Like, it's like,
I'm sure I could say this in a shorter way. No, wait, I don't need to say it.
I don't need to say it at all.
This is completely unnecessary. Yeah. So yeah, certainly the more you work with the same writers, the more you get to know what their writing needs. But I think like with anything, it's just practice, right? It's just getting familiar. And, some people are, checklist people. They make a big checklist and they say, okay, let's look for passive voice. Okay, let's look for throat clearing. Let's look for, really long paragraphs. How many of these paragraphs are too long? Let's look for lists that are written as paragraphs instead of bullet lists. And they'll go through their little list point by point and go, okay, what can I fix? What can I fix? What can I fix? But that can be very time consuming because it means going through the text over and over again. I like the idea of checklists more than I actually like using them.
Well, it's probably a good way to start.
Yeah, so anytime
Yeah.
you're doing something new, it's kind of nice to have a checklist to make sure, even if you just go through and do everything that you think you need to do and then look at the checklist and say, what didn't I do?
Right. Yeah, because I think sometimes it's helpful to have a system, some kind of
Mhm.
system, instead of haphazardly, oh my God, there's that. Oh, I've got to get that.
Yeah.
Back and capture this.
Yeah. So the final segment of this course, the week 6, is basically that. It's basically going, okay, how do we put this all together and approach a document? And that'll be your homework for week 6 is to find a document and fix it. So you can start looking for a really badly
1,000 of them if you
yes start looking for a really badly written document to work on.
Well, they're just so I don't know, so constipated sounding and bureaucratic and just overly complicated. We have
well, then
way too many of them. Anyway.
your job will be, your homework will be easy. You'll be from an
Yeah,
easy starting point.
Yeah, it's just well, I work in house and there's usually practically no time. I mean,
Yeah,
people are just to give this a once over. We need it on the website fast.
exactly.
So
Yeah,
basically, all you can really do is kind of do your best and chip away at it, because often that document will come back for a revision or next year's version or the next edition,
yeah,
whatever, and then you get to chip away at it some more.
yeah. You have to sort of do triage.
Yeah.
What's the most egregious problem?
Yeah, but it's fun to, I'm starting to really spot that, the things that it's not that I would have let them go, it's that I would have groaned when I saw them and known that I probably wouldn't get away with changing them, but now I'm getting braver and going, no, this doesn't say anything. Like we got
Right.
to at least figure out what dominant religious discourses means. Like, what are you trying to say here?
I'm sure I don't know.
Sorry, I'm gonna have to leave shortly, just FYI.
Okay, yeah, okay. We can speed this up a little. Speaking directly to the reader. So any persons with specific dietary requirements, allergies, restrictions must make said restrictions known to the Department of Allergies and Dietary Restrictions, because every company has one of those, at least 2 weeks prior to the event, filling out form 2119-A37. Maybe it's the Army, I don't know. My rewrite is, if you have food allergies or dietary restrictions or requirements, please inform the Department of Allergies and Dietary Restrictions. You should do this by filling out form 2119-A37 at least 2 weeks before the event.
How do you feel? I made the first sentence a question. Do you have special dietary needs, allergies, or restrictions? If so, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Is there any plain languagey rule around like making asking a question as a
Questions are good.
Okay.
And questions in long documents, questions are often used as headings, because people can then skim the document and go, that's my question. I have to read this part. Or you have a section called allergies and dietary restrictions. And they go, oh, okay, that's me. I have one of those. And they skip ahead to that part.
Okay.
So yeah, questions are fine. Did anybody else have anything on that?
I used just use form 2119 blah blah to inform the Department of Allergies blah blah of any specific dietary requirements, allergies, or restrictions. The form must be submitted at least 2 weeks before the event.
Yep, sounds good. The Department of Allergies and Dietary Restrictions will send out letters to each person whose forms have been approved 2 days prior to the event, which the individual must present in order to receive their complimentary meal. Failure to present such a letter will result in the individual not receiving a meal. So everybody loves to be called the individual. If we have approved your form, the Department of Allergies and Dietary Restrictions will send you, or possibly we, if that's who it's coming from. If we have approved your form, we will send you a letter 2 days before the event. You must bring this letter with you to receive your free meal. If you don't have your letter, you will not get the special meal you requested.
Is the last sentence necessary?
No, but in reality, you
Yeah.
have to tell people certain things twice.
Okay.
Bring the letter. No, really bring the letter.
Okay.
No letter, no food.
No letter, no food.
That's very
No
plain.
soup.
That's
For you.
really plain language. No letter, no food.
Yeah.
Right. Everybody's going to understand that.
Yeah, and that's why I put it there. I thought, well, people will go, oh, I didn't realize I had to bring the letter, even though it says you must bring the letter.
Yeah.
But that's just me. I have very little faith in people sometimes. Change the following sentences into active voice. The complaint was filed against Ms. Anthropic by Miss Ida Pression and will be reviewed by the disciplinary committee next week. So I made the complainer the subject. So Ms. Ida Pression filed a complaint against Ms. Anthropic. The disciplinary commission will review it next week.
Yep.
Donors must be advised that their contributions will be used for the greater betterment of public facilities. Greater betterment. That's not government speak. I don't know what is. We must inform donors that we will use their donations to improve public facilities.
Sorry, say that again.
We must inform donors that we will use their donations to improve public facilities. There are a bunch of ways you could do this one, I guess. That's the one I chose. Did anybody want to share a different one?
I had virtually the same thing, except for that their contributions will be used. I left it in the passive,
Okay.
but it's better to use the verb. Definitely.
It was determined by the board of directors that no violation of the Transparency Act had occurred. Anybody want to take a crack at that one?
The Board of Directors determined that the Transparency Act had not been violated. I didn't know how to make that positive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think depending on the situation, if there's an explanation of what they were accused of, it could even be the board of directors determined that whoever was accused had not violated the Transparency Act.
Right.
And I think it's okay that it's negative because, somebody was obviously accused of something and the result is, no, they didn't do that thing. So you kind of have to keep it negative. Or that so-and-so complied with the Transparency Act. If you wanted to phrase it positively. But I think, in a situation where somebody's accused of violating an act or breaking a law, then it's perfectly clear to say they didn't do that.
Right.
As opposed to what they did do. And then we get to positive wording, coincidentally. Revise the sentences using positive wording. Employees may not submit complaints against other employees directly to the disciplinary committee that have not been pre-approved by the employee's designated human resources representative. So again, this is probably in an employee handbook type situation.
Right.
So my solution was your designated human resources representative must pre-approve your complaint against another employee before it can be submitted to the disciplinary committee. I don't know if anyone took a different approach.
Well, if you have a complaint against other employees, you must have it approved by your human resources representative. Then you can submit it to the disciplinary committee. I actually had it all as one sentence at the beginning. It made more sense to me, but then it's long.
Yeah, it could be two. So then it can then be submitted to the disciplinary committee would probably be a second sentence. Applications will not be considered without proof of income, credit score, and 2 references. So I had, you must include proof of income, your credit score, and 2 references with your application in order for us to consider it. And
Sorry, did you say in order?
I did say in order for us to, you could leave out in order. It's not necessary, but it can trip people up when you leave it out.
Okay.
So you must include proof of income, your credit score, and 2 references with your application for us to consider it. So some people would group for us with application, your application for us. Your application is for us, as opposed to with your application for us to consider it, which is why I threw in the in order.
Yep.
A lot of people leave it out in an effort to make their writing more concise. Okay, so limiting words. You may both collect the benefit when supporting an unemployed spouse and as a primary caregiver. So you may collect the benefit both when supporting an unemployed spouse and as a primary caregiver.
Sorry, Michelle, did you say when both supporting and?
No, I put both before when. So the 2 options are when supporting an unemployed spouse, or you may collect the benefit when supporting an unemployed spouse, or you may collect the benefit as a primary caregiver.
Okay, I understood that. So sorry, where does the both go?
After benefit.
Oh, okay.
Because when is part of the first option.
Right. I actually put a verb for the second one so that it was
okay. Yep.
when
It could be
supporting and
reworded.
when serving as a primary caregiver.
Okay. Yep. That works too. Perfectly good solution. Staff reporting harassment may only submit 3 complaints against the same employee per quarter. So I had staff who are reporting harassment may submit only 3 complaints per quarter against the same employee. That's probably not the only possible solution, but it's the one that made sense to me. Per quarter could go at the end. And she has either decided to enroll at Harvard or Yale. She has decided to enroll at either Harvard or Yale.
So I actually said she has decided to either enroll, but that's not right.
Nope.
Either. No,
Because the either is which school.
Yeah.
got it, yes.
And it's the way you've put it is the way a lot of people would say it in conversation. And that's the thing with the limiting words. What we do when we're talking is not necessarily what we should do when we're writing.
Mhm.
I think I said in the presentation, when we're talking, those words just come out when they come out. And we don't think about it too much. We don't worry about whether they're placed correctly.
Unless,
But
unless we're being taped.
even then,
No, but sorry, she has decided to enroll either at Harvard or Yale, or enroll at either Harvard or Yale.
I had at either, otherwise you have to put either at Harvard or at Yale
Yes, got it.
for
think I struggle a
parallel
lot.
structure.
Yeah,
Struggle a lot with only.
Mm.
Yeah. a
I
lot
had
of
may
people do.
only submit 3 complaints. Instead of may submit only 3 complaints.
Yeah. Yep. Again, that's conversationally, that's
Mm.
probably more common.
You can
But
only-
really the only refers to the number of complaints you can submit,
Right.
not the fact that you're submitting.
I wonder too, sometimes when I'm reading again with only, it's kind of like, well, I don't know if that's in the right spot. Like it could be a
Mm.
newspaper article or
Mhm.
something like, I'm not sure about the only. Like, is that-
Yeah. I mean, it can come before a verb, like you can only walk on the pool deck, you may not run, right?
Okay, maybe that's.
So it's not a problem with it being a verb, it's just a problem of what it refers to in this particular sentence.
Right.
These last ones are kind of long. I'll try and be quick. So these are just general, try to make this sound better. So I'll skip reading the original because you guys read the original. So what I had for the first one was the Committee for Disciplinary Action decided that Ms. I. Depression's complaints against Ms. Anthropic violated the Code of Employee Conduct, Section 3, Paragraph 5. The committee acknowledged that the complaints had merit. New sentence, however, the code states that employees may file a complaint against their supervisors only for the minor offenses listed in Section 2. Sentence, also, they can file only one complaint at a time. Sentence, they must write the complaint only in abbreviations and not use complete words or sentences. Cheeky. So there are obviously a bunch of ways this could have been done. But the idea was to just separate out all these different thoughts into individual sentences so that they make sense. It was a bit of a mess. The second one, the confidential information that we share with you may include any information that we collect or generate, period. This can include information in oral, written, graphic, or other media, period. The information may be communicated in meetings, phone calls, or electronic messages, period. Information that you should consider to be confidential includes technical and business information regarding : and then a bullet list,
Mhm.
designs, drawings or illustrations, specifications, existing or contemplated products, and production. And then a final sentence, you should consider this information confidential, even if we do not tell you that it's confidential when we share it with you.
I had a feeling this one could use a bullet list, but I couldn't
Yeah, and
how
there
to
were
pull it
several
together.
lists. And then you start to question, well, should they all be bullet lists? Should some of them be bullet lists? Should one be bullet lists? So there were a lot of ways to do it.
Right.
Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for this session. It's been really helpful. I love this module. I have to run.
Yep,
But
go for it.
thank you. Okay.
Bye.
See you next
Bye.
week.
See you next week.
Does anybody will have any questions about those last two or any comments about them before we wrap.
Definitely challenging.
Yes.
Definitely
Yeah. But it's getting closer to the real world now, right? It's
Right.
not just, okay, here's the thing you should do with this. It's like, what should you do with this? Here's
Exactly.
a piece of bad writing. Do something.
Yeah, and as you as you set this up, Michelle, too, but by the time we get to those last two, it's really applying everything now.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
trying to see all the things from the summary that
Yeah.
actually could be applied
Yeah.
to.
So it's like practice one at a time. And it's like you learn in school, right? With language, practice one thing at a time and then put it all together.
right.
So yeah. So this is I
So
mean,
that's
this is we made intentionally challenging sentences.
and that's the kind of thing we should be looking for in our own example, I guess, for the end.
Yeah, I mean, if you want the final assignment to be useful, then choose something that's representative of the kind of thing you work on, right? Make it real. Because there's no point in going out and taking something from a legal contract when you never work on legal contracts.
True.
Right.
But well, we'll wait for Claudia with her
Yes.
examples. Maybe.
Yes.
Maybe you've got one for everybody.
I attended a conference session on, I think it was on, clarity and stuff, but they had used as an example, they handed out copies of a Rogers terms of service agreement.
Anybody read those things? Blah.
Just disgusting.
Yeah.
But it is interesting. Like I have seen a couple of stories on court cases where, the judge looks at the contract that the customer apparently violated and the company's suing them or whatever. And the judge just goes, as a customer, you couldn't possibly know what you were supposed to do.
Mm.
Case dismissed.
Mhm.
And that should be a wake-up call for companies, right? If you're holding people to terms that they couldn't reasonably be expected to understand without a law degree,
Right.
then they can't be expected to be held to those terms. Like,
Yeah. I mean, the contract is made for the company to protect the company, not help the consumer.
but it's not going to protect them.
Well, not in this case, no, but I mean.
Yeah. If they're expecting it to protect them from what a consumer might do, they have to tell the consumer what it is they can't do.
Yeah, actually, that reminds me, like the terms of use when you're using Apple or
Yeah, the thing
Microsoft, right, or
you
any
scroll through
application.
and go, I agree.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I do
because you're
sometimes try to
tired.
read,
Yeah.
but Yeah.
Because I'm too tired and I know this is very boring and I don't
Yes.
understand it anyway.
Or you're in a
No.
hurry. Okay, I agree. Great. Let's move on now. I got to download this thing. But yeah, like sometimes
Yeah.
you start to go through it. Like I really should read this, right?
Yeah.
And you get about midway through and you realize, wow, like there's a lot more points coming here, and you just give up, right?
Yeah. Yep.
It's because it's not made for me. It's to protect them
Yep.
against
They
me.
they are absolutely counting on nobody reading it.
Yeah, and they just get longer and longer.
Yep.
More and
So
more points.
it's possible the governments will start stepping in and saying, hey, here's what you have to offer, here's what you have to do. But they're not doing it yet.
Right.
Europe will probably be first. Europe is usually first
Right.
at
Right.
protecting consumers.
Well, maybe it'll be work for all of us eventually.
Well, if you really dive into the plain language thing, the ISO standard for plain language is coming out soon.
Hmm,
So that's an international standard.
right.
And that will probably motivate certainly governments and probably large companies to go, oh, maybe we need to actually do something about this. There's
Right.
an international standard we're supposed to meet,
Right.
which could open up a lot of work opportunities.
So would that standard have been read by an expert such as yourself in plain language?
That's there's been an international working group for several years working on this. It was supposed to come out late last year. It's been delayed a couple of times. I think the latest thing I heard was June this year. But it's been worked on extensively by, some of the real pioneers of plain language. And of course, the challenge was to make it applicable everywhere, not just in English speaking countries. So sorry?
The experts would have had to agree. There would have to be consensus.
Yes.
As well, which
So, they had to
isn't
reach out
guaranteed.
in a lot of different areas where people speak different languages and say, okay, does this work for your language? So it's really more principles based than rules based. It's not a bunch of rules.
Mm.
It's principles that you should work by.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of fascinating to try and come up with language guidance that's not language specific.
Mm-hmm.
Very difficult because languages vary so much.
Yeah.
What might be considered a really long sentence in one language is sort of average in another.
And the parts of a sentence are
The
not
parts of,
the same.
yeah, and the order
Sometimes-
they come in and,
or they're non-existent.
with the punctuation differs.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's very complicated. I'm glad I wasn't on that team. Sounds like hard work. I don't know. I'll just read whatever they came up with. But hopefully that's happening soon. But that should generate a lot of not just interest in plain language, but a lot of authority for people who say we need to talk about plain language in our company or in our government or whatever. It gives them another sort of serious bit of backup to say, look, the international community has agreed that this is important.
Right. Yeah, because the concept has been around for a very, very long time.
Oh, yeah. And there's
Yeah.
been a Plain Language Act in the United States for, I don't know, 20 years, something
Mm.
like that, 30 years, I don't know. But
Mhm.
it only really applies to government.
Right,
Like government stuff is supposed to be written in plain language.
right,
But they were hoping it would trickle down, which is-
right. Right. Yeah, again, when you're interacting with consumers of all kinds of
Yeah.
backgrounds, for government, that is a priority, but again, if the purpose is not to make it easier for the consumer, but to make it more difficult about getting sued or trying to
Yeah,
figure out, well, what is the service that I'm entitled to?
Yeah.
Of course, corporations aren't going to
but
be.
the research is there, and the research says, using plain language saves the company money.
Hmm,
Because when people actually understand what they're agreeing to in their contracts, they make fewer complaints.
Mhm.
They spend less time asking questions and getting, calling call centers, which cost money, and asking for explanations and taking you to court. And
Right,
so it's usually a money saver to use plain language. But a lot of companies just aren't hearing that.
hmm,
The line I get though is we don't have time or we don't have money for it. It's like I think
Yeah.
at least some of our people, our managers
Yeah.
realize it would be a great idea, but they also realize how much work it would be.
Mm.
But that's why I always say, well, then start, don't try to
Yeah.
go back and redo
Start-
everything you've done.
Start
for the
with
last
this
10
new
years.
thing.
Start with what you've got today. And
Yeah.
just that will be a step, right?
Exactly. It doesn't have to be, let's scrap everything we have.
Yeah, you can't rewrite everything you have, but I do chip away at stuff
Yeah.
when it comes back because we revise a lot of things from year to year.
Or,
chip away at it some more.
pick the one thing that's giving you nightmares. Like if there's a form
Yeah.
that people have to fill in that 50% of people are filling in wrong,
Yeah,
fix that
why don't you
form.
just fix it?
mhm.
Yeah.
Fix the form, and that's going to save you millions of dollars.
Yeah. And gray hair.
And gray hair.
Staff who've answering the same questions over and over and over again.
Yeah. I mean, forums are an easy place to start, right? It's,
Mhm.
the these are causing you problems. People fill them in wrong. Then you have to call them and get the missing information. Then you have to explain to them why they filled it in wrong. And that, you know, it delays things. It, you
Mhm.
know, it costs a lot of employee time. Fix it.
Right.
Make it easy to fill in the first place. Make it clear the information they need to give you.
I find if once in a while when I can slip something onto a web page that sounds
Mm.
human, like, hi, you might be waiting for this and we're working on it. Thanks for your
Mhm.
patience. You know, we're just
Exactly.
I find that people always respond because you are talking to them directly
Yep.
and then they go, okay, and they're, they're
Yes.
fine. I just think if you sound like you're just like you're
Something
just
as simple as an
directing
auto
them.
reply that says, we're going to get back to you in 2 to 3 days. Instead
Yeah,
of not having an auto reply
yeah, yeah.
and having the person, you know, email 4 hours later and going, nobody's answered my email.
Mhm.
And then make a phone call because nobody's answering emails.
Well, nobody's answering their phone.
I refuse to answer phones anymore.
I think I need to text. We're gonna start
Yeah,
texting.
yeah, that's true.
Yes.
If it's not an email, forget it. I think I've got my sample for the last,
Oh,
last-
good.
I mean, I remembered a webpage that was just painful to work on, so I will share it here. It's so long and so boring, and it's by staff who are so earnest. And
Oh,
it's
no.
also been signed off, it's always been signed off by 65 people, and by the time,
Oh, yeah.
so I did my best, but it's awful, and I
Yeah.
know no one's reading it anyway,
No.
you know?
Yeah.
And then they throw in because I work for a church, the religious language that just is the topper. And by the way, I'm not religious, it's just a job, so you can't offend me or anything or all that stuff. It's just a job like every other job. But yeah, I might just tackle that webpage again because I
Oh.
just threw my hands in the air at some point
Yep.
a long time ago. But no one's reading it anyway. We can tell from the web stats that they
Yeah.
are most of the stuff coming out of our social justice people, which
Right.
is really too bad.
That is too bad. And
It is
maybe if
too
it was
bad.
more readable, they would read it.
Yeah, maybe. It's just there's a lot of a more is more mentality. Like,
Yeah. No, that's
you
not
need
how
all
the
these
web works.
resources, all these links, all this explanation. And we keep saying people don't get past a third of the page. If
Yeah.
they're on it for 30 seconds, we're happy, you know? No, but they need, you know, we're trying to educate, you know, you're putting them to sleep.
Nobody wants to be educated. People want to find
Yeah.
out, people want to find the information they're looking for.
Yeah,
They
it's
don't want to be told what they're supposed to learn.
Yeah, I know. It's getting around. You're right. It's about give them the information they want, not what you think they need to learn.
Yep.
You know, anyway, we've got a lot of this kind of thing, but that might be my example, but we'll see. We'll see
Okay.
what your parameters are first, because I got lots of handbooks I could tackle too.
Yeah.
But isn't the wording
Choose my
coming from a
favorite
higher
one.
power?
Nope. It's just coming from a wordier power. Okay, well,
Okay.
I will wrap it up for now. And next week we're going to talk about paragraphs.
Ooh, it's getting the things are getting longer. and
We're
longer.
building. We went from words to sentences to
Last
paragraphs.
class is a whole book.
We don't have time for that.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks,
Have a good
thanks,
night,
Michelle.
ladies.
See
Thank you, you too,
next
Michelle.
week,
Thanks.
folks.